Hey everybody, this is Panfish Guy and welcome back to PFG Fishing and part 3 of our spider rigging series. Today we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of spider rigging, discussing the type of equipment that you will need to consider to set up your boat for spider rigging. So again, we're looking at this from a low budget perspective. My best advice to you would be to start small and go from there. Some people make a big purchase of gear and tackle and everything, and then they decide after they try it out for a while that maybe they don't really like spider rigging so much. I was one of those people at one point, but I got over it. I'm going to show you some of the equipment I use and discuss your option. And if you prefer higher end equipment, that's fine. You got the budget, go for it. Just don't come crying to me when your wife finds out how much you spent on it. Let's head out to the garage and check everything out. So if you're interested in spider rigging, let's start with the boat. My boat is a 1997 Monarch Pro 160 beater model. It is a relatively small boat, but it has decks built into it, so it's fairly heavy. So it's not real, it's small, but it won't tip over real easily because of the weight. I would compare it to a bass tracker of similar size as far as the weight. My best recommendation is that you find something stable, especially if you're going to have two people in the front of the boat spider rigging. My ideal boat for spider rigging would be something like one of those War Eagles with the wide beam in the front and a big deck where you can sit 3 people on the front of it. Maybe someday when I hit the lottery. Let's talk about seating. So for my particular setup, I was able just to mount 2 extra Swivel-Ease mounts on the front of the boat and just use my existing poles and seats in those mounts. And it worked fine for me. I didn't have storage where those mounts went in, so I didn't have to worry about being able to open a rod locker or anything like that. But if you have storage on the front of your boat, there are multiple options, and if you don't want to drill holes through those storage doors or put mounts on them, there's lots of options that utilize a center pole mount that basically go in the center pole. The seats kind of go out and around it, and real nice setups. There's one in particular I had my eye on. If I had a boat like that, I'd probably look into it. There's a gentleman by the name of John Thomason on Facebook who runs a company called Double Seat. It's DUB-L-Seats. He makes these double seat mounts, and man, those things are sharp. I mean, they look outstanding. But there's a lot of options for those. You go to the Grizzly Jig catalog. There's lots of options for seating on the front of a boat like that if you don't have the ability to punch holes in the deck and put seat mounts in like I did. Let's talk about the rack. There's a lot of different options for your mounts, for your pole holders, right? So I have a unit I bought from Grizzly Jig. It's a manufacturer named Griffin, and it's in the Grizzly Jig paper catalog. It's not actually on their online catalog. So, but there's lots of options for those racks, and sometimes you could buy 2 separate 4 mount racks from I think Millennium makes one that's fairly economical. I went with the T-bar just because I was there. I could actually see it and touch it, and I'm like, I'm going to buy one of these, and I ended up having to buy a replacement because I left it sitting on the dock one day when I was at a lake. But another story. But there are a lot of options for those racks, and they can get pricey. They can get really pricey. And again, if your wife's watching your budget, you might want to look at the lower end stuff. But again, you want to maybe start small and kind of work your way up. I did it the opposite way. I bought the biggest I could find, and but I like I say, there are a lot of different options in this category, and I urge you to shop around, not buy the first thing you look at. One important tip: when you put your mount on, you want to make sure you give yourself enough room between your knees and your rack that you can kind of negotiate and walk in and out of there. At the so, and you're not banging your knees on it. I actually mounted mine as far forward as I could when I first put it on, and I found I had to basically scoot out to the very edge of my seat, reach out as far as I could, and grab that pole, and it sucked really. So I had to move it back about a foot, and I was good then. Poles. So my current inventory of poles is, I have 4 Wally Marshall Tightline Series trolling rods, 14 footers. I also have 2 ACC crappie sticks. It's a GS14 model, Green Series 14, and everything's 14 foot except for my other 2 poles, which are like no-name 12 footers that I bought off a Facebook yard sale. But they work pretty well too. I used to own a pair of whooping sticks. They were Cabela's brand at one time, and I really liked those poles, but they currently reside at the bottom of Table Rock Lake. Story later. In terms of those poles though, the Wally Marshall rods are absolute beasts. I mean, they have taken major abuse. Those were the first poles I bought when I started learning how to spider rig, so they got beat up right away because I really didn't know what I was doing. They had one drawback to them: they're a little heavy. The ACC rods are super light, but they still got a lot of backbone for you to lift fish out of the water, and I kind of took a chance on those because I like to actually hold a pole in my hand when I buy it, right? I like to feel if it's got some balance to it, what have you. And I kind of took a chance on the ACC rods because I ordered them online, and but by all accounts, the folks that were using them, some of the other YouTubers like 3 Pound Fishing and SK's Crappie Catching Adventures, he was using them at one time too. So by all accounts, they were really good rods, and some of the guys who were spider rigging with them just loved them. So I took a chance on them, and I really like them too. There are a ton of options as far as rods go. If you were to go to one of the crappie forums on Facebook, like Thump Therapy or, Crappie Fishing Fools, and you type, you'd ask, hey, what's the best spider rigging rod out there? And you'll get 10 different answers. You really shouldn't probably need to pay any more than about, 60 to 80 bucks for a decent rod. And yeah, I know there are some higher end ones, and like I say, if you got the budget, go for it. One other note on rod length. So I've got 14 foot. I'd never fish any deeper than 10 foot on a spider rig. I think the 16s are just a little bit of overkill. I've got a 16 foot boat, so if I'm putting a 16 foot rod in my boat, I've got stuff hanging out, and it's just, it's bad enough with 14 foot rods, but 16 is just a little crazy. Reels don't make a whole lot of difference. Basically, the reels are just a line holder on my spider rigging rod. So long as they're capable of holding a decent 10-pound test, 10 or 12-pound test line, that's all you really need. You don't have to go spend a bunch of money on reels. Bottom line. Drift gear. I want to stress that drift gear is probably the most important aspect of spider rigging that I didn't get at first. And actually I bought some, but I was resistant to using it, and I paid a dear price for that. It is so important that our next episode of this series is going to be dedicated to drift control. It's a concept that was kind of lost on me. I've got 2 drift socks. I've got a drift control sock that I bought, and that was the initial one I bought with the boat when I started. And then I figured out, I probably need a second one too, just in case. So I got a second one from Bass Pro. The point to it is that if you're out spider rigging, you just let the wind take over your drift, and you don't have control of what's going on. That one, you get going too fast, and you're just blowing by fish. Where instead of just gently easing that bait up in front of them, that bait's zooming right by them. They don't even have a chance to get after it. 2. If it takes over, you're running into snags, you're running into logs, and there's no way to stop that boat, and you're just going to tear stuff up. And bait management. So, for the most part, I use minnows, and I do use some jigs on occasion. I've started toying with that a little bit more, but for the most part, I use minnows when I'm spider rigging. And there's nothing worse than stopping by the bait shop on the way to the lake. You pick up some minnows. You get out to the lake and you're fishing, you're starting to pick up a few fish, and you're thinking, oh man, this is really good. And all of a sudden you look down in your bucket and all of your minnows are dead. It's happened to me. And sometimes they'll bite dead minnows, other times they won't. So, and the bait shop's 20 miles away. So you got to have a good system to keep your bait fresh, keep your bait alive, particularly when the weather gets warmer, so that you can continue fishing. There's nothing worse than stopping in the middle of the day and having to go buy more bait because you ran out or all your bait died. So I use we've used a combination of, I've got a couple of Floetrol type buckets that basically you just hang off the edge of the boat and they float and keeps your minnows fresh while you're drifting along, and just keeps them in the water, keeps them cool. Works really well. And then Donnie's got Mo Fisher has a homemade bait bucket that he made out of like a cat litter bucket or something, I think, and it's got a pump on it and everything, and we use that in the front of the boat to keep the bait we're using at the time in there, and then we'll keep a bucket or 2 hanging off of the side of the boat with the majority of our bait. Which, being able to keep that bait alive and fresh and what have you is really important, and that's something that's probably kind of overlooked when you start into that. I know I certainly did. The one other thing you want to consider is a net. So you're using 14-foot poles. You got all of these poles out in front of the boat, and as you say you get a big fish on, and maybe it's a 2-pound, 2.5-pound crappie, and you're trying to lift that up out of the center of these 8 poles. It's a pretty good bet you're going to lose that fish trying to lift it up. So you want to get a good net that extends, that your buddy can reach down there, or you can reach down there and snatch that fish out of the water without having to lift it up and into the boat and risk losing it along the way. So good extending net. I got a Fraybill net from, it's like the local farm and home. It extends to like 8 foot. And I think I paid like $40 for it. So that gives you a lot of equipment to consider. And I hope you shop around, find out what works for you and what's economical. Your wallet will thank you later when you actually do some shopping instead of just buying the first thing you see. Again, I do recommend that you start small and kind of go from there, because there is a real possibility you set up your boat for spider rigging, you get out there and do it once or twice, and you're like, man, that sucks. So that's going to be a wrap for today's video. Hope I gave you enough information to get you started, and be sure to, if you have a question, be sure to leave me a comment. I'll be sure to answer, or just a comment in general. If you enjoy my videos, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Tap that bell to be notified when a new video is uploaded. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, don't forget to check out our friends at my724outdoors.com on the web and Facebook. And check out my Facebook and Instagram pages. Also coming soon, panfishguy.com.
Hey, knock it off.